This question came from a viewer who wanted to know how to write Excel VBA code to talk to another application, but without having to set a reference to that application's library. This is basically the difference between early binding and late binding. It's a technique I've mentioned in several previous videos, although I've never dedicated a separate video to the technique, so I guess it's about time I did. To get set up, I've got a fairly basic workbook with a simple table of the top 5 highest grossing films, and I've just copied that data straight from Wikipedia from their page, and then just done a bit of basic formatting to tidy it up, and created a simple chart on that as well. If you want a copy of this data, I'll drop a link in the video description so you can download this file along with the finished code. But for now, I'm just going to head straight to the Developer tab and open up the Visual Basic Editor and then insert a new module into the project. And I'm going to, for the first example, write some code in Excel that's going to create a new document in Word, copying that table and chart into a brand new Word document. So let's create a quick subroutine called something like Word Report Early Binding. Early binding means that we set a reference to the other application's object library before we start running or even writing any code which refers to it. The reason we want to do that is because when we do, we'll get lots of help from the IntelliSense to prompt us with the objects, methods, properties and other items that belong to that library. Without the reference to the library, I need to know every single object, method and property that I want to reference in Word and the exact syntax of the code I need to write to get it to work. As a very simple example, let's imagine I wanted to declare my first variable to hold a reference to the Word application. If I say dim_wd as, then I want to reference the Word library, but unfortunately I can't, because at this point Excel doesn't even know that Word even exists. So to get that to work, what we're going to do is head into the Tools menu and choose References. There will be a list of checked references at the top of this list already, the standard 4 libraries that will always be referenced in any new Excel workbook. Visual Basic for Applications, the Excel Object Library, OLE Automation, Object Linking and Embedding, which controls the copying and pasting between applications basically, and then the generic Office Object Library, which holds references and definitions for generic Office things such as shapes, pictures, buttons, that sort of thing. We want to set a reference to the Microsoft Word library, so let's scroll down this list to find Microsoft Word. It's a fairly long list, and then once you've found the reference to Microsoft Word, make sure you check the box next to it. The version number you see there is determined by the version of Office that you happen to be running, so I'm using an Office 365 subscription at the moment, so I happen to have version number 16 of Office. But check whichever version of the library you have available, and then once you've done that, you can click OK, and we'll now get lots more help when we write our code. By the way, once you've referenced an object library, when you head back to that dialog box, you'll see the library has listed itself up at the top of the list, so you don't have to hunt for it again when you want to refer back to it. Just to demonstrate what effect that's had, if I now say dim_wd as soon as I start typing the word Word, I'll get my little icon representing the Word library, that little set of books icon there. And then when I type in a full stop after that, I can see all of the new classes I have access to from the Word library. So the first class I'm going to use in here is the Word application. One of the other useful features of having set a reference to the other application's object library is that we can browse through all of the classes and other items that are defined in that library using the object browser. So we can do that by heading up to the View menu and choosing Object Browser, or just by pressing the F2 key on the keyboard. When you first visit this page, it will be showing you a list of all the classes defined in every library you currently have referenced. You can narrow this down by clicking on the drop-down arrow and then choosing the application that you're interested in this case Word, and then you get an idea as just how many additional classes you've accessed by setting a reference to that one additional library. The other nice thing about this is that we've got quick access to the built-in help system, or Microsoft's online help system. We can right-click on something in these lists and choose to view the help, and that will take us away to Microsoft's online help system explaining how those Word techniques will work. So if you're not that familiar with them, you can get lots of useful help at that point. I'm just going to head back to the object browser and then close that down to get back to my code. I can hit the cross in the top right-hand corner there. And then one more thing I'm going to do before we continue actually manipulating Word, I'm going to declare a variable to hold a reference to a Word document object. So I can say dim.doc as word.document. You probably noticed that I was quite deliberate about specifying the name of the word library when I declared these two variables. Strictly speaking, it wasn't necessary for the document variable. If I take away the word.document part and then type in a new space after the word as, you'll see that I can reference the word document directly in this IntelliSense list, and there's only one example of the document class defined in all the libraries I currently have referenced. So I could get away with saying dim.doc as document for a slightly shorter line of code. I wouldn't have quite so much success, however, if I tried to do the same thing for the application variable. If I take away word.application and then type in a new space after the word as, if I try to reference just the word application, you may notice the fairly obvious problem there. I've got two libraries referenced at the moment which refer to and define what an application is. One of those items comes from the Excel library and the other comes from the Word library. Now, it doesn't really matter which of the two words you pick from this list. That's not sufficient to distinguish between the two libraries. Picking that word there doesn't define what type of application you picked until you attempt to run the code. And the way that the VB editor will work out what type of application you mean is by going up to the Tools menu and choosing References, not literally of course, but it will process this list of references in the order in which they're listed here. So it goes from top to bottom, and the first library it encounters, which has a definition of what an application is the type of application you're going to get. So because Excel is sitting above the Word library, you'll find that you'll always get an Excel application when you just say application as your variable type. Now, it is possible to move reference libraries up and down the list, but only so far. I can never place the Word library above the Excel library. And even if I did, even if I was able to, that would just cause me the opposite problem. If I wanted to reference an Excel application, I wouldn't be able to because the Word library would be sitting above it. So that's why we distinguish which particular library we're referencing before the class of object. So in this case, I'll replace the word.application and word.document. It makes sense, I think, to be consistent about that. Now that we've got all the basic stuff out of the way, let's write some code to actually manipulate Word. We won't do anything particularly complicated, just enough to demonstrate the difference between early and late binding. So I'll start by saying set wd equals new word.application. And again, it's important to distinguish what type of application I'm interested in. I can't just say application here because that would refer to the Excel application. So word.application. I want to make sure that I can see Word on screen. By default, it opens as a background task, so I wouldn't be able to see anything happening when I'm debugging and testing my code. So I'm going to say wd.visible equals true. Once I've done that, I'm going to create a new document in that application, and I'm going to say set doc equals wd.documents.add. So you can see all the useful help I'm getting from the IntelliSense. If I wanted to see any additional parameters of the add method, I could open up some round brackets and get a tooltip. It describes what type of object is returned by the method. All the standard help you'd expect if you were referring to Excel objects, properties and methods. At this point, I'm going to open a with block, and in here I'm going to refer to the selection of the Word application. I'll just close my with block there, say end with, and there's lots of things we're going to do here. Let's first of all set a style for the first line of text in our new document. So I can say dot paragraph format dot style equals, then I'm going to use a generic built-in style called heading 1. I know that's part of every single normal Word document. I can then set the alignment of the paragraph, so I can say .paragraph format .alignment equals, and at this point I'm prompted with a list of constants. These constants again are defined in the Microsoft Word object library. You can probably tell that by the little prefix WD. So I'm going to go with the first item there, WD align paragraph center. Then after that I'm going to type in some text, so I'll apply the type text method to the selection. And I'll just type in a basic header, let's say something like movie report. I'd then like to type in a couple of paragraphs, give myself a blank line between the header and the actual table of data that we'll paste in. So let's say type paragraph and then repeat that type paragraph. Then, having done that, I want to set the paragraph style back to the normal style. So I'll say dot paragraph format dot style equals, and then this will be the normal style. And then I want to set the alignment of that paragraph back to left aligned. So paragraph format dot alignment equals, and again I get my list prompting me for which constants I can use. This time it's WD align paragraph left. Next, I'm just going to do something in Excel. I'm going to refer to the current region of cells to which range A1 belongs on the Sheet 1 object. So just for convenience, I'll reference that using its code name, sheet1.range A1.currentRegion.copy. Then I can revert to doing things back in the Word application. With the selection, I can say dot paste. Nice and simple. There are lots of ways of pasting stuff into Word there, as you may be able to tell. I'm going to go with the most generic one possible, the paste method. And then after that, I'll type in a new paragraph. So I'll say dot type paragraph. And then I'm going to copy my chart. So again, I'm going to use, just for convenience, the chart's code name, which is called chart1. So I can say chart1 dot chart area dot copy. And then once again, just apply the basic generic paste method to the document. So at that point, having added all that code, I'm going to run the subroutine, and we should find a visible instance of Word opens up eventually with a new document created in it. And if I have a quick look in that document, I've written in movie report as a header, copied my table and copied my chart, and everything's looking basic but okay. I've just closed down the Word document we've created, and I'm going to add a couple of extra lines of code now to save the document and then quit from Microsoft Word. So at the end of the with block, I'm going to write a couple of lines. I'm going to say doc.save as to, followed by a space. Then I'm going to fill in just the file name parameter of that method. So I'm going to refer to the path that this workbook is saved in, so this workbook.path. And then concatenate to that a backslash and then movie report as the name of the document. So that will just make sure that the Word document is saved in the same folder that this workbook is saved in. Having done that, I can close down or quit the Word application. So I can say wd.quit, and then Word will be closed down. And at that point, it's questionable as to whether we need to make Word visible at all. We could make this run as a background task just by removing that line of code, or in this case, I'm just going to comment it out. So we won't see Word flash up on screen, but we will find we end up with a Word document sitting in this folder. So having done all that, let's just run the subroutine. Shouldn't take too long. And when it's finished, we can have a check back in that folder, and there's my movie report document. I can double click on that to open it up just to check that it looks sensible, and it's the same thing we've just generated. So if early binding works so beautifully and provides you with all the convenience of the IntelliSense and prompts you at every single line of code, why on earth would you ever want to use any alternative technique? Well, to demonstrate that, I'm just going to save this Excel workbook, and I'm going to transfer across to a different machine and try to explain why early binding isn't necessarily always the best approach. So I've switched across to an alternative machine. Apologies if at this point the screen doesn't look quite as sharp as it should do. The resolution on this monitor isn't quite as good as the one on the other laptop. I guess we should just be thankful that it's not in black and white, because we've gone back in time a little bit here. We've gone to a laptop which only has Office 2010 installed on it, as opposed to Office 365 on the other machine. You might have been able to tell that from the icon on the desktop. This is the file that I've just copied from the other machine. I'm just going to double click to open it up, and then choose to enable the content. And then just to demonstrate that the code is exactly the same, if I go to the Developer tab, head to the Visual Basic Editor, it's all exactly the same code we just wrote on the previous machine. But when I try to run this subroutine here, this isn't going to work. It can't find project or library. And the reason for that is that when we set a reference to the word object library using the early binding technique on the other machine, we set a reference to the particular version of the word library that was installed on that machine. If I head up to the Tools menu and choose References here, then you can hopefully see the word missing in all caps next to the word 16 object library. You get a clue as to which version number we should have referenced here with the other libraries, the Excel library and the Office library. Those are both set to 14. So any default references will automatically detect the correct version to use. So Excel and Office have downgraded to 14, but any additional references we set won't do that. So to make that work, what we can do is uncheck the reference to the Word library there, scroll down the list to find Microsoft Word 14, somewhere in there, and there it is. And if I check that box and then click OK, I can happily run the subroutine now, and we will find, when we switch back to the desktop, that we've got a Word report, movie report. If I double click to open that up, it's done all the things we've asked it to do in the earlier version of Word. Now obviously if we were giving this file to a group of end users to work with, we don't want to have to ask them to reset the object library references each time we send out a new version of the file. So at this point we'll head back to the other laptop and rewrite our subroutine in a late-bound fashion so that our end users don't have to do anything. Just to tidy up first though, I'm going to close down the Word document and the Excel workbook without saving anything, and then just delete those two files off the desktop, and we'll come up with a brand new version back on the other machine. So we've gone back to the future, back to the original laptop on which we wrote this early binding version of the subroutine. The next job is to convert this into a late binding version, and just before I make any changes I'm going to grab a copy of the existing subroutine, paste it down at the bottom of the module, and then just comment out all of the lines of code stored in it. I just want to keep it in there for reference in case I wanted to go back to that version later without having to make too many further changes. Then I'll head all the way back up to the top of the module and change the name of the remaining subroutine to Word Report Late Binding. Late binding means that we're not going to rely on the Word object library. We're going to uncheck the reference to that library from the Tools menu, References. We can simply uncheck the box next to the Word 16 object library. Now ordinarily I would have solved a few problems before I do this bit, but I would just want to demonstrate what will happen when we don't have a reference to that library, but we have our early bound version of the code still in place. If I click OK, as soon as I attempt to run this subroutine, I'm going to get all sorts of messages complaining about not being able to resolve the name of that particular class. So Word application is of course defined in the Word object library, and in order for our code to compile properly, the code needs to be able to interpret what a Word application is. So it's no great surprise that that line of code fails now that we don't have the library which defines what that type of class is. This will be true for both the Word application and the Word document. And the solution to this is to not try to use a specific class for our variables. If I just hit the stop or reset button to stop running the code, what we can do is change Word application and Word document into the much more generic object type. This means that the code doesn't have to resolve the references to a Word application and a Word document before we attempt to distribute the code. So changing those both to objects will solve that particular part of the problem. The next problem we'll encounter is with the very next line of code, because once again we've tried to refer to the Word application class, and the definition of that class is in a library which is no longer referenced by this project, so that reference can't be resolved. If we try to run the subroutine, we'll get yet another compile error saying that that type is not defined. Well, it is defined, it's just not defined in any library that we're currently referencing. Now we can't solve this problem just by adding or exchanging Word application for the Word object. You can't use the new keyword to create a new generic object. So I'm just going to undo that change there. What we'll change instead is the word new. Instead of using the word new, we'll use a reference to the function called CreateObject. The nice thing about the CreateObject function is that it allows you to pass in a specific class name. As you can see there, the first parameter says class, but it allows you to pass this in as a string. And when you pass it in as a string, the code doesn't have to resolve that reference at compile time. It can delay the resolution of that class until the code is running. So we'll do it later, hence late bound or late binding. So if we wrap Word application in some double quotes and some round brackets, we'll now find that those two lines, or those pair of variables and that line which creates a new object will now work. We have one final problem to solve with this particular subroutine, and that's with references to any constants that were defined in the word object library. We've got two in this example. We've got word align paragraph center and word align paragraph left. If I try to run the subroutine at this point, we'll see we get yet another compile error. The first constant is highlighted in the background and it says variable not defined. In order to resolve this problem, I've got a slightly more tricky job. A constant is just a convenient descriptive word which masks a number behind the scenes. And the only real way I can find out what number is represented by that constant is to set a reference to the word object library again. I could also look it up in the Microsoft Help system, but it's far more convenient just to set a reference to the word object library. So I'm going to head back to the Tools menu and choose References, and then scroll down through the list to find Microsoft Word. Annoyingly, it's fallen all the way back down to its original position in the list again. But I can find Word, check the box next to its library, and then click OK. If I press the F8 key to begin stepping through this subroutine, one way to find out the value of a constant is to hover the mouse cursor over it, and you might just about be able to make out there that it says word align paragraph center equals 1. If I do the same thing for word align paragraph left, that's equal to the value 0. So at this point what I can do is just add the number 1 for the alignment of the paragraph format at the beginning, and then I could either delete or maybe just comment out the constant name. I find it helpful to keep the constant names in there because it means that I understand a little bit better what I was intending to do with that line of code. Then I can head back down here and change this to the number 0, and again I'll just comment out the WD align in paragraph left. I'll just stop running the subroutine at that point, and then at this point everything should be working normally. So I'll head back to the Tools menu and choose References. I can uncheck the reference to the word library and click OK. I'll just head back to my folder and get rid of any existing copy of the movie report document just to prove that it's going to work with the late binding code. Delete that, head back to the subroutine and run the subroutine, and once the code is finished running, I ought to end up with yet another version of the word movie report, but this time generated using late bound code, but still generating the exact same end results. So now that we have our code working with a late bound version, no reference to the Word object library at all, we can close down that Word document. I'll just make sure that I've saved the changes to the code I've made, and then I can close down the Excel workbook as well, and then we can transfer this across to the other machine and check that it all still works on there as well. So we've gone back in time again, and I've dropped a new copy of that early binding versus late binding workbook on the desktop. So I'll just double click to open that one up, and then we can head to the Developer tab and the Visual Basic Editor, and we should just be able to see with this late binding version of the subroutine and without the reference to the object library, if we head to the Tools menu and choose References, we'll see that we don't have any such issues with the missing object library references. But we can still run the subroutine, and the reference will be created at runtime. That's what the late binding technique does, and once we look back at the desktop, we should find a new copy of that movie report, and we end up with exactly the same results as last time, just with far less effort for your end users. So there you go, that's the basic difference between early binding and late binding, how to switch between the two, and why you might need to in the first place. Of course, if you're not dealing with writing code for other people with different versions of the same application, then you don't need to worry too much about late binding. Early binding is by far and away the more convenient thing to use, and that's what I tend to stick to if I have the choice. Hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into why you might need to do all that. Hopefully it answers the original question as well. If not, feel free to carry on asking more questions and we'll see what we can do about giving you an answer. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.